Instead of carefree school days, online classes and lessons held in bomb shelters. Instead of lullabies, sounds of sirens and explosions. Instead of playing in the yard, clearing the rubble after Russian strikes. Instead of meeting friends, waiting, hoping they'll be pulled out from under the ruins. Instead of warm family evenings, tears over a coffin and families torn apart.
I have two dreams: for the war to end and for my dad to come home.
This is the reality Ukrainian children live in today, the reality of a war that Russia brought into their homes. What do children feel during wartime? And how do they cope with the aftermath of Russian terror? Watch in our special report, Stolen Futures, How Russia's War Steals Ukraine's Childhood. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has brought not only ruined cities and villages and countless civilian deaths, but also to one of the deepest tragedies: the deaths of hundreds of children. Russia has deprived young Ukrainians of the most precious thing, a normal childhood, causing irreparable harm to their psychological well-being and development. According to UNICEF, the war has affected more than 7.5 million children in Ukraine. Around 2 million have become refugees, while the rest are forced to live under constant threat. The United Nations reports that 90% of Ukrainian children suffer from stress, anxiety, and post-traumatic disorders. In addition, the Russian Federation continues to commit deliberate war crimes, forcibly deporting Ukrainian children to Russia, tearing them from their families, and subjecting them to harsh indoctrination and militarization. Among those children were Ksenia and Serhiy. Ksenia and Serhiy are orphans. Before the full-scale invasion, they lived with a foster family in the city of Vovchansk, Kharkiv region, just a few kilometers from the Russian border. The city became one of the entry points for Russian troops invading Kharkiv region in 2022.
I woke up in the morning getting ready for school. Everyone was already up, rushing around saying we had to gather documents and essentials because the war had begun. I said, "Wait, what war? You must be joking." Right after those words, an explosion. A bridge nearby was blown up, then another blast. Everything became unclear and chaotic. Unfortunately, we didn't leave. We ended up under occupation from the very first day.
As soon as the occupiers took control of the city, they established a military commandant's office. And their first move was to seize control over education. Their goal wasn't to give children a chance to study. It was to re-educate them according to their own ideology.
In 2022, it was already the end of the school year. We were finishing the Russian curriculum, and in early June, my homeroom teacher came to our home and told my foster mother that I had to receive a Russian graduation certificate and go study in Russia, because there were supposedly no places left to study in Vovchansk. They weren't gone because they never existed, but because the occupiers had destroyed everything. Nobody asked for my opinion. On August 31st, I ended up in a technical college in the city of Shebekino, studying hairdressing, something I neither liked nor wanted. My brother was taken to a Russian summer camp, supposedly for 2 or 3 weeks of rest in Gelendzhik.
The children ended up in different cities, 1,000 kilometers apart.
I tried to save my brother from being taken to Russia, but nobody listened. After the camp session ended, my brother was placed in a Russian foster family. They brainwashed him, saying, "In Ukraine there are Nazis, they'll kill you. You should stay here, you'll have a great future in Russia." At my college, they forced us to learn the Russian national anthem. I always refused. During their anthem, I sang the Ukrainian one. They raised Russian flags, and we had so-called talks about important things, where they explained how everything worked over there. Attendance was mandatory. Speaking Ukrainian or wearing Ukrainian symbols was forbidden. We also had history lessons where they taught us that Russia was mighty and great, that we must respect Russia and practically pray to Putin. They kept pressuring me to take a Russian passport, promising all the benefits of the Russian state. I refused. For that, I was expelled from the college and from the dormitory.
Ksenia found shelter with acquaintances and began planning how to return to Ukraine with her brother.
I managed to contact my neighbor from Kharkiv. That's where I was born and lived for many years. I asked her to reach out to Kharkiv's social services and explain our situation. That we were in Russia, that we needed help, that we wanted to come home. Before that, I called my brother and asked if he'd agree to go back with me if there was a chance. He said, yes, of course. After that, I promised myself I wouldn't return without him. Then the process began through the social service. They connected me with the charity organization Save Ukraine, which helped me prepare all the documents demanded by the Russian authorities.
When the paperwork was ready, Ksenia set out to find her brother. But before she arrived, Serhi's Russian guardians suddenly cut off all contact, blocking her on social media. Desperate to see him again, Ksenia turned to the Russian Guardianship Service for help.
I only knew the name of the city where he was. I had to contact the Russian social services and ask for permission to see him, to at least talk to him. They told me that the authorities had already visited Serhi and that he didn't want to leave with me. He wanted to stay in Russia. They allowed me to see him, but I could only take my brother if he agreed completely.
When Ksenia finally saw Sergei after their long separation, she barely recognized her once cheerful, radiant brother. He looked frightened, distant, and refused to return to Ukraine.
It was the hardest test of my life, because during all that time in that family, they were systematically brainwashing him with Russian propaganda. In fact, I had become a stranger to him. He didn't even recognize me. We talked for 3 hours. At first, he said he had friends. Everything was great. They had fun. But then he started repeating everything those parents had told him, that there's war in Ukraine, that it's terrifying there, that there are fascists and Nazis who will kill you, that you're not needed there. I realized the enormous responsibility on me. I had to gather all my strength and confidence to convince him by any means. I told him to just try coming back for 1 month. Of course, I had no intention of letting him go back. It was a manipulation, but it worked. He agreed, and that's how he came home.
According to Ukraine's Human Rights Commissioner Dmytro Lubinets, over 20,000 Ukrainian children are being held in Russia. Around 2,000 of them are orphans. As a result of deportation, these children face forced Russification, psychological pressure, and gross violations of their rights. They are sent to so-called re-education camps, placed with Russian foster families, and subjected to ideological manipulation.
The most horrifying situation is when a child is left without any guarantee of safety or of their basic rights: the right to family, to health, to education, to information, and to their own identity. These rights are being systematically violated by the Russian Federation against Ukrainian children who are forcibly taken beyond Ukraine's borders. A child who remembers their Ukrainian roots, who studied in a Ukrainian school, who spoke Ukrainian, is often placed without parents in a hostile environment. Russia has created a reality where everything Ukrainian is labeled as negative, as bad. In schools, kindergartens, and closed institutions where these children end up, the atmosphere is openly hostile. They face constant bullying. We know this from testimonies of those who managed to return. This entire system of re-education, forced rejection of their homeland, and systematic physical and psychological violence severely damages their emotional state. Children return to Ukraine with advanced PTSD, depression, apathy, and sometimes suicidal tendencies.
In addition to those deported, around 1.6 million Ukrainian children remain trapped under Russian occupation. According to the Almenda Center for Civic Education, they live under strict control, subjected to inspections, interrogations, and relentless attempts to erase their Ukrainian identity. Schools impose a Russian curriculum filled with propaganda, glorifying the war and promoting military training.
They're thrown into uncertainty and forbidden from everything that once felt normal. Their opinions, Ukrainian school, Ukrainian language, even online learning. They live in constant anticipation of danger or punishment, even when innocent. It's a psychological captivity. This kind of experience leaves lasting marks. Post-traumatic stress reactions, constant anxiety, fear of something bad happening, hypervigilance, and the inability to relax. The coping mechanisms learned in captivity stay with the child for a very long time, even after returning to a safer environment.
When the occupiers invaded Kherson, Dmytro was in the first grade. He played football and dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. Dreams that the war destroyed. Kherson was occupied from the first days of the invasion, and Dmytro's family was forced to abandon their home and hide in a basement under constant shelling, day and night. The occupiers established a military administration and began hunting down locals. Dmytro's parents, who worked with the state traffic police, immediately became targets. Russian soldiers broke into their home, conducted searches, inspections, and took Dmytro's father to the so-called basement.
We were constantly being searched. He saw all of it.
After the liberation of Kherson, Dmytro and his mother fled to a safer part of Ukraine. But the trauma of occupation left a scar that won't fade.
He had no school, no childhood. We survived the occupation, the deoccupation, and the flooding. We stayed too long. I should have left earlier. My son suffered a psychological trauma.
Dmytro still doesn't attend in-person classes. His parents arranged for online schooling instead.
We suggested he go to a regular school to start adapting, socializing. But he's not ready yet. He's constantly anxious about safety, where I'll be during an air raid, where he'll be, whether we'll find each other. We still can't be apart. He's already 10, but the fear is stronger. We talked to psychologists and they told us not to push him. Just give him time. Let him heal and move at his own pace.
To cope with the trauma of occupation, Dmytro attends rehabilitation sessions with a psychologist, a necessary step to help him gradually reclaim the carefree spirit of childhood and begin to forget the horrors he's endured.
I try to sign him up for everything possible. Clay modeling, drawing, sports. Even my husband, who came from Kherson, said, "Dmytro's starting to open up a little."
It's crucial to understand that the experience of occupation, of such trauma, serious loss, and witnessing horrifying events that cause shock, all of this has long-term effects. Unfortunately, there are many such cases.
Head of the National Social Service of Ukraine, Vasyl Lutsyk, cites devastating figures. Over 13,000 children have lost parental care since Russia's invasion, and more than 1,000 are complete orphans. Losing one's parents is one of the deepest traumas a child can endure, not only the loss of loved ones, but of trust in the world itself. A parent means safety and stability. Many of these children are placed in orphanages, or, if they are lucky, in foster families. But even there, they often feel unwanted and abandoned. This leads to withdrawal, avoidance of social contact, and fear of emotional closeness, resulting in isolation and loneliness in adulthood. Without timely psychological help, the trauma erodes motivation and resilience, shaping a generation forced to live with lifelong loss.
The loss of one or both parents is something a child carries for life. There are stages: acute grief, shock, denial, and every child lives through them differently. Some cry, others shut down, some express anger and hatred. But if this trauma isn't addressed, it can turn into severe PTSD, chronic depression, or persistent anxiety. When a child loses their parents, they lose themselves in many other aspects too. Social interaction, their community, access to basic routines like school, hobbies, and interests. It's a complex trauma that affects every part of a child's existence.
When the war began, Vyacheslav had just turned 17. He lived in the Donetsk region, in the small settlement of Verkhnotoretsky, with his family, his mother, brothers Danilo and Timur, and sisters Nicole and Olivia.
Before the war, my mom and I were planning to open a store together. I had already started working in construction, even had my own small crews. Life was full, interesting. No one could imagine that Ukraine would be destroyed like this.
Since 2014, Verkhnotoretsky had been on the front line. From the first days of the full-scale invasion, Russian troops began relentless shelling: artillery, mortars, cluster munitions, airstrikes. Vyacheslav's family lived in a private house and hid in the basement during attacks. The town was on the verge of a humanitarian disaster. To find at least some food, Vyacheslav, the eldest, went with his mother to get supplies.
Our town was occupied quickly. They destroyed everything. My mom was an incredibly strong woman. She worked all her life for us. That day, when the shelling finally stopped, we went out to find something, anything, that could help our family survive.
2 Russian shells fell nearby, changing the 18-year-old's life forever. Shrapnel, smoke, screams. His mother lay beside him, bleeding. He tried to save her, but her wounds were fatal.
I don't know when this pain will fade. I'd give anything just to hold her hand again. I miss her so much.
The war unleashed by Russia took from him the most precious person in his life, and even robbed him of the chance to bury her. Realizing that each day under occupation could be their last, he evacuated his younger siblings from the occupied area. Then he took legal guardianship over them, becoming their only protector and support.
I was terrified they'd take the kids away. Mom always said, "We have each other." I would never abandon them. I was scared our family would fall apart.
Vyacheslav assumed the role of both parent and provider, determined to maintain the life his mother once gave them. His days are scheduled to the minute, driving the children to school and extracurriculars, focusing entirely on their needs. Weekends are for family. Meanwhile, he studies in his 3rd year of university and works to support them.
No matter how hard it gets, I know why I keep going. For us, for our family. When I feel like giving up, I somehow find the strength to carry on. Thank God the kids didn't see what I saw. Without them, without their smiles, I don't know where I'd be today.
Vyacheslav still can't come to terms with the loss. In the hardest moments, he remembers his mother, believing it's her strength that helps him go on. All he dreams of now is to give his younger siblings the carefree childhood they deserve. A life without the shadow of war. Another family, the Kenzers, is also learning to live with their loss. Their father, Roman, volunteered for the front.
My husband said, "I'm going, and you won't stop me." He told me, "When the war ends, my sons will ask me where I was. What will I say? That I stayed home, waiting for the draft, too scared to fight?"
At first, Roman served in the territorial defense. Soon, as part of the 204th Battalion's rifle company, he was deployed to one of the hottest areas of the Luhansk front.
I didn't believe it at first, until he sent me a photo with a rifle and documents showing he'd volunteered.
In June 2022, Roman turned 40. Inna and the children came to celebrate with him, not realizing it would be their last meeting.
We arrived for his birthday, but they were called to combat. He spent his 40th birthday at the front in Donbass. On June 29th, 2022, we got the news. He was gone.
At the time, their eldest son, Maxim, was 6. He understood what had happened from his mother's tears. His younger brother, Mikhailo, was only 4.
Little Mikhailo was the youngest, and for a long time he kept seeing his father. For about 2 months after the funeral, he would walk around saying, "There's Daddy standing over there. Daddy came to see me. I see Daddy. And Maxim, the older one, felt hurt because he couldn't see him. They both were at the funeral. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life. But I decided that even though they were so young, it was better to let them live through that moment of goodbye than to be deprived of it. Someday, when they grow up, I hope they'll understand why.
For them, their father was the embodiment of courage and endless kindness, an ideal that lit up their childhood with a warm, unextinguishable glow. They loved being silly together, and he was the one who taught them the joy of making things with their own hands. Maxim still treasures those tender memories, how his father helped him overcome his fear by letting a huge beetle crawl onto his palm, or how they stood in awe feeding turtles at the zoo.
Dad let us do everything. He taught me how to feed a turtle by hand and even how to hold a stag beetle.
I loved spending time with my dad. We always played and went to Grandma's village together.
After their father's death, the boys went through long and painful stages of grief.
Misha could cry in a corner at kindergarten, then go back and play. But Maxim, he holds everything inside. And then one day, it all bursts out. I try to help them understand, to make them proud of their father, that he gave his life voluntarily so they could study in a Ukrainian school, carry a Ukrainian passport, get an education in our country, and speak our native language. I believe that this sense of pride and patriotism, born from both love and pain, will stay with them forever. And one day, they'll pass it on to their own children. At least, I hope so.
The pain of loss will never leave them. But to help her sons return to a normal life, Ina established a routine. In addition to school, Maxim and Mikhailo dedicate time to self-development. They attend a traditional dance club, build Lego sets, and read a lot. Only when the mind is busy, Ina says, you think less about the trauma. But when grief returns and emotions overflow, they have their own ritual.
When sadness hits, the three of us sit together and we cry. I tell them, boys, it's hard for me too. I'm strong and independent, but I'm also alone. And then we find little moments of joy. As psychologists say, you have to be happy in the moment. Ice cream? Then it's ice cream. Cocoa. Cocoa it is. Drawing? Let's draw. Cartoons? Let's watch. Tiny moments of happiness. That's what keeps us going.
Mikhailo has a tradition. He brings candies to soldiers to thank them for their service, and they give him unit patches in return. His collection has grown impressively.
When we go for a walk or to Grandma's, I always take candies with me. I go up to people in uniform and say, fist bump, and hand them the sweets. Near us, there's a K-9 training center where the military work with dogs. I often visit, and I already have 5 patches from soldiers there, and more than 40 in total.
Other important adults also play a key role in the boys' lives. Their grandfather, godfathers, and dance coach.
The boys have amazing godfathers, strong and kind men who spend a lot of time with them. They miss that male presence, so naturally they're drawn to men. For example, when choosing a dance class, if there's a male coach, we go there, because he becomes a kind of dad figure for all the kids. My father also spends a lot of time with his grandsons. He'll say, boys, let's talk, man to man. And you can see how their eyes light up, like they've grown wings.
They often remember their father, their walks, their games, those carefree days. Now they visit his grave or the alley of glory near their home to say hello, to hug him in silence, and then run off again, back to their lives. They don't dream of toys, PlayStations, or things. Their dreams are simple and deeply human.
My biggest dream is for the war to end and then for my dad to come home.
I have 2 dreams, for the war to end and for my dad to come home.
By invading Ukraine, Russia has brutally violated children's rights under the UN Convention and Geneva Conventions. Explosive weapons in populated areas have killed and injured countless children, destroying schools and hospitals. This is a direct assault on their right to life and safety. In the occupied territories, children have been tortured, and there are documented cases of sexual violence, crimes against their dignity and security. Many are forcibly taken to Russia through so-called filtration camps, where their identities and citizenship are changed before being placed with Russian families, erasing their Ukrainian identity. Russian authorities also impose their education system, ban the Ukrainian language, and spread militaristic ideology, depriving children of their right to education and culture.
We are witnessing a full spectrum of violations of Ukrainian children's rights. Their right to life, to development, to health, to free expression, to education, to access basic services. All of this is being systematically violated by the Russian Federation. These children cannot develop at the same level as their peers. For example, in the countries of the European Union,
in March 2023, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova, Russia's so-called Commissioner for Children's Rights. They are accused of participating in the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children from occupied territories, a war crime under the Rome Statute.
we must expand these arrest warrants. The International Criminal Court can and should issue warrants for others involved. Those who enforce citizenship changes participated in the deportation of Ukrainian children to camps.
The actions of the Russian authorities, their systemic violations of Ukrainian children's rights, may also constitute violations of international law. Under the Rome Statute, such acts can potentially be classified as genocide, as they target the most vulnerable group, children who are granted special wartime protection under international law.
It is also crucial to continue raising this issue and push the International Criminal Court to reclassify these actions, because we have every reason to say, this is a crime against humanity. This policy is large-scale, systematic, and represents the official line of the Russian Federation.
The war of aggression unleashed by Putin against Ukraine is not merely a territorial conflict. It is a systematic act of genocide aimed at destroying an entire nation with a particular focus on its future, its children. According to UN-confirmed data, Russian armed forces have taken the lives of 659 Ukrainian children. Of them, 2,180 were injured, suffering wounds of varying severity, including shrapnel and blast injuries. These physical traumas are compounded by deep psychological scars. According to experts, over 80% of surviving children suffer from depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or suicidal tendencies, intensified by the loss of parents and the destruction of their homes. These wounds won't heal with a peace treaty. They will leave lasting scars across generations, undermining the genetic and emotional fabric of an entire nation. Those responsible, from Putin and his ministers to his generals and soldiers, must face international justice for the lives stolen, the futures destroyed, and the cities turned to dust. Marina Nesterova, Special Report.